When you think of the Mojave, what's the first thing that comes to mind? The sun-baked sand, the scorching heat, the scorpions and lizards. Maybe the barrel cacti that you can't actually drink out of, or else you'll end up like Sokka.
Drink cactus juice. It'll quench you. Nothing's quenchier. It's the quenchiest.
A lush green paradise filled with little freaks is probably the furthest thing from your mind, but it's out there, hiding in the mountains, waiting to be explored, and maybe, just maybe, looking to add you to its ecosystem. Greetings, fledgling botanists. Welcome to Scream Study. My name is Amber, and today we are once again diving into the world of Fallout New Vegas. We are all very familiar with the barren wasteland known as the Mojave, but what if I told you that there was a place filled to the brim with greenery just waiting to trap you? I mean, waiting to be discovered. Vault 22, also known as the Vault of the Future, lies in the mountains to the northwest. If you don't know what you're looking for, it's easy to miss. As you walk around the range, you're met with unclimbable, towering rocks. But then, what is that you see? Just barely visible between the valley walls. Is that lush green lawn in the Mojave? That can't be possible. Or can it? Before we jump into the current state of Vault 22, I think it's important to look at its history. Vault 22 was the only vault in the Mojave not assigned to civilian housing. It was actually a dedicated research vault and was populated by scientists even in the pre-war days. Their main goal was experimenting with staple crops to combat global hunger before the Great War. Even after the world got microwaved, they continued their agricultural research, with plans to sustain the vault's population via the plants grown in it. A lot of their specimens were donated by pre-war defense contractors, including a company called Big MT, or Big Mountain, which we will come back to later. I learned of Vault 22's existence on a quest from Thomas Hildern, who works for the OSI, or the Office of Science and Industry, which is the lead research and development agency within the NCR. You can find Dr. Hildern in Camp McCarran, although there are a few other quests that will lead you to the Vault. In this instance, Dr. Hildern is trying to harness the power of accelerated growth they see outside of the Vault in an effort to curb a food shortage they're predicting will lead to mass starvation a decade down the line. From the get-go, Dr. Hildern kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Something about him just felt off, dismissive, dishonest. Truthfully, this is not the man I would trust with the future. You find out from the lab worker, Dr. Angela Williams, that Hildern has been hiring mercs to go and retrieve the data from the vault. Only none of them have come back. This might account for some of the shiftiness from Dr. Hildern. That's a pretty big thing to just leave out of the conversation. But we already agreed to do it, so I guess it's our turn to try not to die. Vault 22 is a bit of a hike from Camp McCarran. You almost have to travel all the way out to Jacobtown and just hope you don't get taken up by anything nasty along the way. You know, I love being literate. And you can improve your literacy too with the help of today's sponsor. I am just kidding. I am not a big enough channel for a sponsor, but subscribe and maybe one day I will be. Anyway, who doesn't like being greeted with a sign that says, "Stay out, the plants kill"? Nothing says, "Come on in and drink some lemonade," like a handful of man-eating plants and some giant mantis. The entrance to the vault is a veritable garden, filled with palms, mushrooms, and ferns, a vine-like ground cover carpeting the alcove. Even the occasional violet and daffodil can be found. Honestly, if it wasn't so disconcerting, the whole thing would almost be pretty. In fact, it almost makes you forget that you're in the desert. Almost. The entrance to Vault 22 is barely visible, concealed behind a curtain of vines. Beyond the door sprouts more. Branches break through the metal floor. On a table to the left, you'll find a makeshift campsite belonging to a woman named Keely. She's left her sleep roll and duffel bag, making a note in the terminal on the table. You can actually pick up a quest while you're at Camp McCarran from Dr. Williams.
Did Dr. Hildern... This really isn't any of my business, but did he give you a job? I shouldn't say anything. I know that. But you're not the first person Hildern sent out to the vault. There were a lot of mercs, one after another. None of them came back. Then about a week ago, there was a scientist, Keeley. She's unusual. Not the sort of person you'd expect, but she's an absolute genius, and he didn't mention her? Not even her name? Or any of the other mercs? But now he's hired you, which means one of two things. Either he heard back from Keeley, and she failed, or he's given up on her. Listen, I make a fair wage, but I'm not rich. Not by any means. Maybe my kind of money wouldn't appeal to your average merc, but I'm willing to pay you if you'll find Keeley and make sure she's safe. Isn't right leaving her out there. No idea if she's alive or dead. I had a good feeling about you. Moment you walked in. I mean it.
Keeley leaves 2 logs on the entrance terminal. In Vault 22 Expedition Entry 1, she talks about establishing her camp, mentioning that there's minimal power inside and she hacked into the security terminal, which shows multiple people have entered and yet none have left. In Vault 22 Expedition Entry 2, Keeley reports that the interior plant growth and the exterior match, which surprises her since there's little sunlight. Even more surprising is that the plants seem to be originating from lower in the vault. She mentions that her Pip-Boy is on the fritz, so she's going to be notating her discoveries on any computers she can find. From there, we can finally descend into Vault 22. At the bottom of the steps, more mushrooms sprout from dirt that doesn't really seem to have a source. The only sound is a flickering bulb in an old Nuka-Cola machine. If you have high enough repair, you can actually choose to fix the elevator and pick a floor to go to. I opted to take the stairs since I didn't really want to miss anything. Oxygen recycling is just as quiet as the entrance, the door almost hidden by the plants sprouting from the ceiling and growing through the cracks in the walls. The lab entrance is the only other door on this floor. It leads you to this room. Something about this is extremely impactful. Maybe it's the fact that there's humongous trees sprouting in the middle of a vault of all places. These must be the ones whose branches we see at the entrance. But where are they growing from? More ferns grow through the grates in the floor, and vines climb the pipes. Something above you continually drips, hisses. As you explore oxygen recycling, you come across purposefully planted garden beds, along with piles of dirt and shrubs. Wandering into this room, more greenery sprouts from fenced-in beds. The control panel sits between 2 large observation windows. 3 terminals can be found, but only one is useful. Upon its activation, a single log comes up. Noise complaint. Apparently, something was rattling around in the level 2 air ducts, and not for the first time. Entering the door to the left of the terminal takes you to one of the places you can see through the windows. There's nothing incredibly interesting. Just more of the same. Hibiscus growing in the floor grate, more shelves lined with plants. But why? Just what happened in Vault 22? As you keep exploring, another door opens, which leads you here. UV lamps are pointed at a mass of soil and flowers in the corner. There are more control stations and boxes full of plants. In the corner sits another terminal. This is the computer where Keeley continued her logs. In Vault 22 Expedition Entry 3, she notes that this level is dedicated to producing plants with a high oxygen yield, hinting at the way the vaults have been known to break down over time due to their planned obsolescence. In Entry 4, she says some of the machines have been modified for an unknown purpose, and that their restrictions for oxygen content and system pressure were bypassed completely. Keeley runs into her first vault creatures in Entry 5. There had been some noises, which turned out to be the giant mantises, like the ones we fought at the entrance. She doesn't understand how they caused a problem for the season marks that came before her, but plenty of vault left to explore. On the opposite side, it's a small control room. It has another terminal along with an observation window through which we can see a different area of the vault. The room we see is filled with mushrooms. The most noticeable thing being, this gaping hole in the wall leading out into the earth. The terminal in this little room only has the option to check inventory. I'm not really sure what inventory it's checking. When you select it, it just says retrieving inventory information without any kind of resolution. The system warning at the top says that its memory's been corrupted, so I guess we'll never know. Descending to level 3, food production, is where things start to get interesting. This is where you get to explore the results of the vault's research firsthand. A mound of dirt. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Until you try and walk through it, coming face to face with our very first spore carrier. This jelly green giant reject camouflages into the plants on the floor. The more one explores food production, the more of Vault 22's secrets begin to come to light. A room with a vat of unspecified liquid houses another patch of plants growing under UV light, along with entries 6 and 7 of Keely's logs. In entry 6, the pieces really start to come together. Up until now, you and your companion have been the only people in this vault. All the stations were left vacant, but there's no blood, no skeletal remains. Just you and the constant dripping of a dead vault. So where did everyone go? Keely's log talks about how the bodies of the scientists who lived here have been overgrown with a form of lichen. Does that description sound familiar? I mean, you passed one as soon as you entered this floor. That's right. The spore carriers are what remains of the mercs sent by Hildern, along with some of the vault's inhabitants. Keely said she walked by many of them without even noticing, and notes that the lichen growing on them doesn't seem contagious to ghouls. Other than that, entry 7 doesn't really hold much information. It's mostly just a hint that the info that Hildern sent you for can't be found here. Pushing forward only reveals more plants and more spore carriers. This level is rampant with them. A terminal found in a small side area contains 3 status reports. Report 9228 talks about the corn growing in another room, mentioning it's a hybrid that responds better to artificial light. It's followed by a brief mention of a Dr. Peters, who had mysteriously been out sick for 3 days. And, the guy that wrote this is definitely not the kind of coworker that you want to have. He's the one, who doubts that you're actually sick every single time that you're absent and insists on double checking that you actually are and not just faking it to get out of work, which I guess when you live in a vault like this and you live for your work and you work to live, it's probably a little bit different, but still, just believe people when they say they're sick. In report 9253, we find out just why human testing isn't good. See, pest control sent a sample of a substance one of their specimens was secreting, and tests showed it had mood-altering effects in small animals. And then they note that they'd be ready for human testing soon. Immediately, that is followed by the staff showing signs of a viral infection. Even the person typing the report has it. Finally, report 9312. We learned Dr. Peters from the first report has passed in the time between 9253 and this one. And that apparently there's a rumor his corpse reanimated and began to attack people. Given the state of the vault, I'd have to say it was more than just a hoax. I will say, these spore guys are sneaky. They really do be hiding anywhere, waiting for the moment your back is turned. I somehow lost both Cass and Edie multiple times during the exploration of this vault. I would just hear the faint sound of Edie's cowboy fighting music off in the distance. along with the occasional slow-mo. Now, this room here with the giant mantis is a very important one. You see this door? Keep it in mind.
That's a surprise tool that can help us later.
There's 2 terminals in here. Going to the one on the desk, we find more logs from the unfortunate occupants, each one more urgent than the last. Security request reports the disappearance of a person affectionately referred to as Assistant Mathers. Medical emergency takes place sometime before the log where Dr. Peters passes, and most likely is the event that takes place before he got sick. He went with the security escorts to find Mathers, only from the sounds of it, Mathers found them first. The last log is just named Help, and I think it's truly the last stand of Vault 22. The person writing it says that security is holding off something in the lower levels, and that the doctor normally in charge, Dr. Bailey, is taking care of his sick wife and daughter, but they also need security on the upper floors as well. And I can only guess why. I just want to take a minute here, show you Cass's little jig that I got. Look at her go. Get it, girl. The door in the wall requires a key and can't be unlocked by engaging with the terminal beside you. You try, it tells you access is denied and to contact your admin. There's something about these windows here in particular that, you just really get to me. I can usually kind of put aside the fact that we're in a vault hundreds of feet below the surface of the earth. But for some reason, looking out these windows into the cavern beyond, it's hard to explain the feeling. The desolation, loneliness, it just really reminds you that you're basically living in a metal lunchbox, a time capsule buried away where no one can touch you. It really drives home that in the vaults, no one can hear you scream. The next floor down is the common area, and it's just as bare as the rest of the place. Just a handful of empty chairs to let you know that anyone ever lived there. Here actually seems to be the origin of the trees. They stand tall from fenced-in planters, shoving themselves through the roof with their trunks covered in ivy. It kind of cracks me up, but also unsettles me that their vault number is plastered everywhere, and I know it's on the jumpsuits too. Don't forget what vault you live in, but also kind of reminds me of that sign on Homer's desk in The Simpsons. Don't forget, you're here forever. This here is another thing I find just haunting. A movie projector left on for who knows how long, showing nothing but static as if abandoned during a showing. Empty chairs still crowd the screen, but there's no one left to sit in them anymore. The overseer's office has a small port window looking out over the common area. Peering out of it is like looking into a snow globe. The world beyond frozen in an eerie green haze. There's also another terminal, and this one is actually extremely useful, letting you unlock the crew quarters, data backup, and something called cavern access, which tells you the override is engaged at the door. There's not really anything else of interest in the eating areas, just a bunch of consumables, and another kind of haunting thing is these shots lined up ready to be poured and drunk. In the billiards room, not only is there more UV lamps, but this is where we find entries 8 and 9 of Keeley's logs. This terminal, I believe, is called Guess What Trivia Game, which absolutely cracks me up. Entry 8 talks about said trivia game, saying that the questions weren't even hard. Apparently, a lot of people were playing it when they died from the airborne infection. And Keeley mentions trying to convert some of the glow lamps into UV spectrometers to check for airborne contaminants. And in 9, she has actually managed to make the spectrometer. And now we understand why the monsters are called spore carriers. Because the particles in the air are spores. And they are the sole reason for the decimation of Vault 22. She notes that she worries the spores will pose a threat to the people of the NCR. And rightfully so. Going to the lower level, it's overcrowded with plants and spore carriers. Like, seriously, there is so many of them. Throw a rock, and I'm sure you'll find another one. There's also this really annoying, constant sound in the background, like a zapping or exploding. Heading through the utility arch, there's another terminal. Someone seems to have put in a ticket to maintenance. The people on this floor were also hearing noises in the vents, just like the ones above. Meanwhile, ticket 2 may have been the canary in the coal mine. People were complaining of a possible gas leak, with symptoms including coughing and other respiratory issues. What was found was no gas leak, but a discrepancy in the mass of the air itself, along with a strange residue on the air filters. This is quite possibly the very first report of the spores. In the room attached, we find the cause of that awful noise. These exposed... I don't actually know what to call power cells? They're not really Tesla coils, but they are spitting out volts like one. I'm sure just the static alone would make your hair stand on end in real life. In the corner, you find a flamethrower, which really would have been helpful when we got here. Moving into the clinic, the terminal provides us with half a dozen medical logs. Case 164 includes 5 patients: Pam Mitchell, Michael Cordella, Samwise Horton, Naoki Fujimoto, and Kenneth Derrida. The group displayed the same symptoms as Dr. Peters, and the practitioner notes they hope there isn't a contagion. Meanwhile, case 173 covers an even larger group: Elizabeth and Marcia Bailey, Hayes and Amy Garfield, Veronica Jenkins, James Keyes, Robert Kirkpatrick, Amanda Lowry, Donald Orlando, Iris Pamino, Stephen Rado, Yolanda Reyes, Kelly Sarkin, Nicholas Valdez, and Herman. They too had the chills, fever, and cough that Dr. Peters in case 164 exhibited. The doctor wants to keep them away from the general populace. Too bad it didn't do any good. Hindsight is 20/20, my friend. Case 162 is the one with the most updates because it chronicles Dr. Peters, who we heard about from the previous logs. Harrison T. Peters, who appeared to be suffering from pneumonia as a result of a microorganism. He didn't respond to the treatment, and so they began to consider exploratory surgery instead. In update 3, we learned that Dr. Peters was dead before he ever entered the surgery. All of his vitals flatlining, leading that surgery to be turned into an autopsy. They discovered his lungs to be completely covered in fungal growths. Most disturbing part? They were still growing. The final update of case 162 ends with Dr. Peters' corpse reanimating and attacking the attending physician, who at least was able to lock him inside. And that's when they realize just what will happen as the illness worsens in the others. The last area to explore is the crew quarters. I want to talk about this room right here in particular, because I think this room belongs to Dr. Bailey. Remember the log a few floors up just called Help? The person that wrote that wasn't normally in charge. They even say that Dr. Bailey was taking care of his sick wife and child, who I'm willing to bet are Elizabeth and Marcia Bailey from the medical files. And what do we find here in this room? A child's bed, along with a spore carrier brute and 2 regular spore carriers. One of them almost looks significantly smaller than the other 2. Child-sized, I'd say. This is also the room where you can find the key card for the cave door. That room being Dr. Bailey's is even more firmly solidified when you go back to the cave door and use the key card. The terminal reads, "Until further notice, the door to the caves is to be sealed at all times by order of Administrator Bailey. See him for further details." Meaning that this has to be Dr. Bailey's key card, and those spore carriers had to be him, his wife, and their daughter. One tragic story comes to a close, but yet another still remains. Disengaging the lock, we can finally go through the door. This door leads you beyond the walls of the vault. Vault 22 is possibly one of the only vaults with access beyond the metal confines. They get to touch real dirt, even if they are God knows how far under the ground. The passages are rife with mantises. One pathway leads to an outside door for oxygen recycling. Another to the entrance to pest control. Final level of the vault. Going through the oxygen recycling door, you'll find a room that we could only view through a window earlier, but there really isn't anything of interest here other than that little callback. The pest control door takes you into a room full of terminals and plants, of course. Only one of them works, though. The contents of these logs teach us more about just what we're up against in Vault 22. The 3 species of threat that now live there. Firstly, the giant Venus flytraps that Cass and Edie have been taking care of up until now. Then there's what they call Mantis religiosa, aka those giant mantises that we've seen throughout the compound. Finally, there's the source of the spores, Bovaria mordicana, and I'm going to butcher this, entomopathogenic fungus, which is just a really big word for a group of parasitic organisms in the kingdom of fungi. This particular fungus colonizes the body of common pests. Even though the host takes 10 to 20 days to die, the fungus keeps the body animated and spraying spores to infect those around it. Now, remember when I said we'd come back to Big MT, Big Mountain? Those samples were originally cultivated at the X22 Botanical Garden at, you guessed it, Big MT. Then donated to Vault Tech specifically for the research going in Vault 22. Do you know what else Big MT is responsible for? Not only this awful fungus, but giant pests commonly referred to as Cazador. And no, not the vampire from Baldur's Gate 3, but these things. And they are a pain to kill and will poison you if you don't get the job done quick enough. Ask me how I know. Big MT also created these Night Stalkers, a genetic nightmare splicing of rattlesnake and coyote DNA. I haven't actually had the displeasure of coming face to face with one, but I can now say that I am not exactly excited about the prospect. The data we need for Hildern is a little farther down the way in a side hall. It's pretty obvious since it's the only terminal that's blue. It tells you that the data integrity is at 31%, but you can download it without any issue. Moving forward, lockpicking this door leads you to another massive hole in the wall and a terminal that allows you to disengage a lock. Going through the hole, you're led out into another cave, but this one opens even further into a cavern, again full of green fog. This is where you find Keely, along with a ton of bugs and Venus flytraps. Keely awaits her rescue in the back of a branching cave. She definitely looks like she knows how to handle herself, and I think she is one of the grosser ghouls that you come across. She immediately asks if the NCR sent you and says she has a plan to deal with the creatures of the vault. You just have to meet her at her base of operations in one of the higher levels.
Took your sweet time. I suppose the NCR sent you? She's such a dear. Not like that pompous little pedant she works for. But that's neither here nor there. These plants have gotten completely out of control. I've got a plan to deal with them, but I'll need your help. Good. Meet me on the 2nd level, and I'll explain what needs to be done.
She also compliments you if you fix the elevator and then run into her after she messes with the controls. Keely is set up in one of the lab rooms we actually passed through earlier. Here, she gives you the rundown. She's pumped the vault full of gas, which needs to be ignited to destroy a majority of the spores, and that is where you come in. Why she can't do it on her own? I am really not sure, especially given the caveat that it has to be ignited close to where it's being pumped in and will of course, explode.
Good, you're here. Ready to begin? Time is of the essence, so I'll be brief. This place is filled with spores that are toxic to humans, and we need to get rid of them. I've pumped the vault full of a highly flammable gas that, once ignited, should destroy the vast majority of spores. There's one problem, though. The gas becomes semi-inert on exposure to oxygen, meaning the gas will have to be ignited close to where it's being introduced. I need you to find the vents where the gas is being pumped and ignite it. Oh, and survive the resulting blast. I set the gas to pump into the 5th level since that's where the concentration of spores was highest. I'd start looking there. Typically, these vaults use circular vents in their air circulation systems. Look for a wall with 2 of them almost side by side. There's one just around the corner outside this lab if you need an example. In the area where the gas is active, any kind of fire or explosion should do the trick. Hell, even lasers would do the job. If you don't have anything like that, I've got some grenades in my bag in the corner that you can use. Yes, there'll be an explosion when the gas is ignited, but I'm sure you'll be fine. Now leave me to my work. Good. Return to me when it's done.
I blew myself up so many times trying to do this. Even when I thought I was safe, the flames still found a way to singe me. I also may have accidentally knocked out Edie for a short while. My bad. Once you manage to finally not blow yourself up, you can return to Keely. She's glad you're alive and reports that the spores shouldn't be an issue anymore. However, she does plan to erase all of the research. Hacking into the system, she sees that it's recently been breached. Wonder who did that. It's crazy. Who would do such a thing? I chose to fess up about it. If you have high enough science, you can actually logic your way out of this little confrontation, explaining that everyone needs to see what happened in order for the tragedy not to happen again. I mean, seriously, could you imagine if the spores were let out into the wasteland? Although, being in the desert, that probably wouldn't go far. Still, God forbid someone did try and recreate the research without knowing what happened in Vault 22 and what not to do. History would just repeat itself. Keely accepts your explanation and unlocks the door to the vault for you to leave. Heading back to Camp McCarran, you can talk to Dr. Williams again. She lets you know that Keely called and tore Dr. Hildern a new one for sacrificing all of those marks to the vault. Honestly, I think Dr. Williams is so cute. Maybe it's the accent. Dr. Hildern, on the other hand, makes an underhanded remark about getting a so-called pleasant call from Keely and calls you charitable for keeping her alive. I mean, seriously, I do not trust this man as far as I can throw him. When you say that the vault is just as dangerous as Keely thought, he basically tells you to F off, that the danger wasn't his problem. It was yours. Upon warning him to be careful with the data, he immediately tries to diffuse your concerns, saying that the OSI are not some vault alchemists, that they would never use technology that wasn't fully tested, even having the audacity to say they're with the government and we should have some faith. As if that has ever happened in the annals of human history, especially when it comes to science and being ethically used by the government. I mean, the entire reason why they're in a post-nuclear apocalypse is because of the government, after all. And I highly doubt any of them learned better in the time since the Great War. With that, the quest, there stands the grass, officially comes to a close. That being said, there is more to the story of Vault 22. Digging into the wiki, I discovered that not all of Vault 22's scientists were killed during the outbreak. In fact, some of the survivors of the vault tried to do what Keely did. However, they were incredibly unsuccessful. Simply releasing the gas into the lower chambers caused an adverse reaction in the spore carriers and caused them to be more aggravated and continue to absolutely decimate the population. By 2096, Vault 22 was completely abandoned. 118 of the vault's survivors fled and headed north to Utah, where they ended up in Zion Canyon. There they encountered another group, a camp of innocent Mexican refugees. Unfortunately, in a typical American fashion, they gunned down the whole camp, killing the men first and shooting down any women and children who put up a fight. Then they took the remainders and penned them up like livestock. A man residing in the canyon by the name of Randall Clark, who was a former U.S. soldier and survivalist, saw what they did and surveilled the dwellers, mistaking their fungal cough as tuberculosis. Clark had been planning a rescue mission to save the captives, only by the time he got there, it was far too late. The dwellers of Vault 22 had eaten everyone they took. In retaliation, Clark killed 24 of the original 118, and eventually a small patrol group found his cave. And after disposing of them, he moved on to camp. I'm going to butcher this again. Cueva Gracia? I did not pronounce that right. 10 months later, over 80 of the original 118 dwellers were dead, both because of Clark, but also consumed by the sickness caused by the spores. The remaining dwellers cannibalized their dead and fled the canyon. No one knows what happened to them after that. Only damaged Pip-Boys and discarded vault suits were ever found. The Sorrows tribe passed down stories of them, naming Randall Clark the father in the caves and depicting his weapons as lightning casting down upon skull-headed figures and the number 22. Without a doubt, what happened to the scientists of Vault 22 was a tragedy, caused by an abundance of mistakes and oversight on the account of multiple parties. What should have been researched to help feed the nation and the world ended up costing an unimaginable price. All we can do is hope that 200 years later, Dr. Hildern and the rest of the NCR government scientists don't repeat the same mistakes and turn the Mojave into a nightmare oasis. That is all I have for you today. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and consider subscribing. Until next time, my name is Amber, and you have been watching Scream Study.